Welcome back to another episode of Cocktails and Tea. I am your host, Cherie. What's up, y'all? How y'all doing? If you haven't guessed from the title of this episode, baby, today we're discussing weed. So, with more states decriminalizing or even legalizing it fully, I thought it was important to clear up, misconceptions and misinformation or lies or myths or even propaganda that we have heard and also that's still around, that's feeding the stigmatization, if you will, of weed. It's furthering it. It's keeping the lie alive. You'll see what I mean by lies. Okay. But anyway, without further ado, honey, go on and get your cocktails ready. Today I'm sipping on a blueberry lemon drop martini. My way. Um, I don't like vodka, as I always say. I don't like vodka. So this is done my way. I replace vodka with tequila. Anyway, moving on. But if you want to see how to make this delicious, and it is really, really, really good cocktail, if you want to see how to make it, or if you want the recipe for it, then head over to my Instagram. I am Cherie, SHARI number 4. And watch my Reels video of me checking this out. Again, my Instagram is I am Cherie, SHARI number 4. And this is a fun one. It was fun to make. It's fun to drink. Especially what we're about to talk about, honey. I'm pairing my blueberry lemon drop martini with some blue raspberry kush, okay? If it's legal where you at, please partake. This our holiday. And if it's not, they ain't none of our business. You do your thing. That's between you and the government. I ain't got nothing to do with that. But please, if it's legal where you at, by all means, partake, okay? And also, please remember to drink responsibly. Don't be stupid. Don't do this. Don't do this. Drink responsibly. Smoke responsibly. Whatever that means. But drink responsibly for sure. Don't be drinking and driving, babe. Get your Uber. Okay? Get your Uber. Uber's everywhere. It's no excuse. No excuse. Moving on. All right. So first, I thought it important to dig into some of the myths and misconceptions that we hear about cannabis, this plant, this herb. Okay, so I thought first, well, let's start. What is cannabis? Well, cannabis is a plant. I just said it. Cannabis is a plant. Cannabis is a herb. Cannabis is also a powerful medicine that can help treat, if you let it, baby. If you let it, that can help treat what ails the human body. Whatever's ailing you, sugar. Hold on. And yes, I do have a straw. Yes, I am being a little bougie today, and you can feel free to judge your mama and mind your business. With love, of course. But I meant it. Moving on. Cannabis is used all over the world, really, not just the United States, even though I'm focusing here on the United States. But it is used recreationally. It is used medicinally for its therapeutic uses. And cannabis has been here for centuries. Long before folks wanted to tax it and worse, criminalize it. Like, y'all really out here criminalizing and locking people up for a plant. It's whatever. Moving on. Um, so let's first start with some of the myths. Um, and give it a little fact to back it up, to give you some facts to dispel some of these myths that that are still being perpetuated by all manner of humans. So the first myth is marijuana is a gateway drug. Hold on, matter of fact, let me light up. You know, I'ma light up for the Anslinger section. I'm gonna light up for the Anslinger section. Moving on. Marijuana is a gateway drug. That's the first myth is marijuana is a gateway drug. First and foremost, there are no facts to support this claim. I couldn't find one. Prohibitionists, politicians that lobby against the legislation of cannabis, and two, also I'm gonna go ahead and throw in the public schools, like the DARE program, I think it was called the Drug Prevention Education Programs that would come to the school. I think it was like a resource officer would come to the school and talk to us about drugs. Well, the school I went to, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and I still remember the human resources girl, no, the resource officers coming in and talking about drugs. But I'm gonna throw them in because they love to throw that marijuana's a gateway drug lie, myth out there. False, very false, untrue. Alternative facts. Okay, now that's fake news. That's actual fake news. Here's some fact to go with that, and I'm also gonna elaborate on this marijuana is a gateway drug myth in particular when I get to the propaganda and the history, when I get to that side of things, because that's directly, it's gonna all make sense where that myth come from. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. I'm saying all that to say that. All right, let's get to it, Cherie. But according to the CDC, if you go to the CDC's frequently asked questions page, this is the quote that they have on there. The majority of people who use marijuana do not go on to use other harder substances. Again, there's no fact to support this claim that marijuana is a gateway drug. But what data do show? What I did find that data shows that marijuana is used, that cannabis is being used as an exit drug. And what that means is cannabis is, according to my research, cannabis is a huge benefit in helping combat the opioid crisis. And what it does is provide a different method of pain relief, because a lot of people who are addicted to opioids get addicted because they are in pain and they're having chronic pain, or they had an accident or something like that, and then the doctors prescribe them opioids and they get addicted. And marijuana has been proven to be, because marijuana of course treats chronic pain, depression, PTSD, just to name a few. They provide it as a different method for pain relief for opioid people who are addicted to opioids and are trying to come down and detox. Also, it makes the detoxing process just a little bit more tolerable for them, because if you ever heard anybody, opioids and heroin, they besties, they cousins, they friends, they kin, they the same thing, okay? They kinfolk. And so the come down, the detox from opioids, I heard, is very, very brutal. And cannabis has been and a benefit to some people who are addicted. Moving on. Moving on. All right, so moving on to the second myth, lie, propaganda, misconception, misinformation, honey, all that. And that's marijuana kills brain cells. Oh, I'm gonna attribute this to the dead officers too, because this is what I heard them say when they came to the classrooms as well, that it kills your brain cells. And of course, we all remember those. We all remember those. Lord have mercy, I can't talk today. We all remember the commercial when they cracked the egg in the pan and the egg sizzle and fry and shit, and they say, this is your brain on drugs." But before it was all of that propaganda, it was a little film that came out in 1936. I have it written down. I do not have it written down. I have the 30s. I believe it's 1936 if I'm not mistaken. I'm gonna have to Google that real quick. So I'm gonna be giving out misinformation here, honey, since we talk about misinformation. But it was a little film called Reefer Madness. One second. So I can see what year she came. Yep, 1936, your girl. Yes. Movie trivia is on. Anyway, that's not a good movie, y'all. Don't look at that shit. It's propaganda. Nothing but propaganda. But Reefer Madness was a propaganda film where they all sat around and smoked weed, and one of them went crazy and started killing folk and shit like that. Just extra and wrong on so many levels. And also, government official, I said his name earlier. You're going to hear it a lot more, especially in the next section. That's Harry Anslinger, this trash-ass human. You're going to hear me say that a lot, too, because he's very much trash. Very much trash. But Harry Anslinger, thanks to him, we got him to thank for this false narrative as well, that marijuana kills your brain cells, and that using marijuana makes you dumber. Honey, moving on. I'm gonna also throw Hollywood in there. Because again, that was a movie, Reefer Madness, and also Hollywood does a trash ass job of depicting people who smoke weed. You know, everybody is, dumb or lazy or couch potato, don't want to, not motivated, just bullshit, lies. So Hollywood, you got to do better too, because that's stoners don't all people who partake in cannabis all don't. You can't put us all in the same box, okay? You just can't. Hollywood like to make it seem like everybody got a 30-second delay, and that ain't cool. Moving on. Number 3, you could become addicted to marijuana. Now, this is a myth that I hear all the time. And, the crazy part for me is that, the substances that are deemed socially acceptable, like cocktails, like alcohol or tobacco, they are literally proven to be way more addictive than marijuana. And cannabis has been proven to cause less dependency. So here's some facts. For an example, a study from 2011, I done got hot, showed that 8.9% of lifetime cannabis users developed a dependency on Mary Jane versus, or compared to, it's up to you, however you want to characterize it, versus or compared to rather the 22.7 8% of alcohol users, and an astounding, girl, just hold on to your edges, 67.5% of tobacco users who develop a dependency. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But y'all leave people alone who smoke cigarettes to the filter and drink like they don't have no liver, right? But me, who just trying to free my mind, free my thoughts, and not punch you in the face. You judge me. Whatever. Moving on. Myth number 4: people only smoke weed to get high. Oh. I have heard this so many times, and this is another myth that's filled with misinformation, like every other myth. Like every other myth on this list, filled with misinformation. Well, first off, the intoxicating and psychoactive ingredient of weed. So the THC that's found in weed, the tetrahydrocannabinol, that ingredient is only one of more than 100 different chemical compounds. Okay, just one, dear. Just one. And those chemical compounds are called cannabinoids. Cannabinoids. That's what THC is, a cannabinoid. The other cannabinoid that you hear a lot, especially now, it's becoming very, very popular all over, and that's CBD. And that is cannabidiol. That one's a little easier to say than THC. THC got like 3 words in one. But the cannabidiol, that's CBD. And that is the non-intoxicating chemical compound. So look, there was a study from July of 2018, and the study said that THC and CBD, for people who have a problem, because that's the THC is the thing that gets you high in weed, but that's only one chemical compound, one cannabinoid out of over 100 cannabinoids. And the research from July 2018 states that THC and CBD, quote, demonstrates considerable therapeutic potential. So I'm gonna say this, then I'm gonna move on to the next myth. Okay, folks use weed for its therapeutic value every day. For people who have depression, people who have anxiety, people who have chronic pain, people who have I heard people who have epilepsy even use it. I've heard people who have MS, people who have Parkinson's disease, PTSD, any mood disorder. There's so many therapeutic uses, so many medicinal uses for marijuana, and everybody likes to lump everyone, and just because someone who just like to get high, now everybody just smoke weed just to get high. It's just so ignorant, and it just show that your ass don't read. That's what I see. That's what I hear when I hear people say ignorant shit like that. It's like, so you don't read at all, like at all. You only read captions that you saw on Instagram, baby. That is just not enough. You gotta be deeper than that. We have to educate ourselves. You know what I mean? We have the whole world at our fingertips at any given moment of the day. It's a goddamn shame how many people out here just repeating misinformation or conspiracy theories, repeating myths and lies and propaganda. Girl, it's Earth is Ghetto. I'm gonna repeat that song. Earth is Ghetto. Just come on and beam me up, Scotty. Because, good God. I mean, I be in the clouds. I be on the moon half the time anyway. Because I smoke weed loud and proud. But, just go and beam me up, Scotty. Because this shit is ghetto. It's ghetto. Moving on. So, the next time you see somebody partaking, just feel free to judge your mama and mind your goddamn business. Thank you. Thank you. Moving on. All right, moving on to weed. This is a new one. This is a new one that I've recently heard. But it's an interesting one. And that's weed is being laced with fentanyl. First of all, weed is a plant. How the fuck you cut a plant with a... Moving on. So I had to see where this myth got some of its legs from, and I didn't have to look far. In a March 2019 press conference, Kellyanne Conway's trash ass is Chester Cheeto's former executive aide. Senior aide advisor. She was a senior advisor to Chester Cheeto's trash ass. They both trash, honey. But Kellyanne Conway's trash ass asserted herself at a press conference, honey, and said out loud, in front of cameras, on a microphone, so we all can goddamn hear her, that people were unknowingly buying cannabis laced with fentanyl. I mean, she put it, went to the corners of her ass and pulled that out, okay? And then the myth was also perpetuated where, actually, this is where Kellyanne trash ass got it from. From one of the officials at the National Institute on Drug Abuse, the NIDA. So, in particular, the director of the NIDA. Girl, not everybody's qualified to hold a position, Cherie. You just don't even do it. But her name is Nora Volkow. And Nora Volkow stated while speaking at a Political Pro 2018 panel, quote, fentanyl is being used to lace a wide variety of drugs, including marijuana. More goddamn lies. It's lies. Lies on top of lies on top of lies. Because this claim has no evidence. No evidence. There are no evidence of drug dealers, street or otherwise, using fentanyl or any other hard drug to cut weed. Girl. So look, this how untrue that is. A DEA senior chemist at the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration Drug Enforcement Agency. Jill Head, her name is Jill Head. She confirmed that fentanyl hasn't shown up in any marijuana seized by the DEA. Now, so and how is it that the director of the NIDA, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, get data wrong and repeat it out loud to only be debunked by the DEA, and people are still repeating this lie? An epidemiologist from the University of California said it best. I saw in a BuzzFeed article on BuzzFeed News that that Dan Ciccarone, I think it's Italian, Ciccarone. I hope I said it right. If I'm not, I'm so sorry. I'm not doing it on purpose. I'm really trying to say it right. Dan Ciccarone told BuzzFeed News, quote, "It's crazy that this story is coming out from our leaders. It shows that concern about fentanyl has reached the level of moral panic, and that fear outweighs rational evidence. There is scant evidence for cannabis laced fentanyl. You know, a common theme that I have noticed while researching for this topic, because again, I wanted to point out the propaganda and that everybody's misinformation that I hear people quote at me on a constant basis when it comes to my weed smoking, or when it comes to weed people who smoke weed or marijuana in general. um a common theme that I have noticed while doing my research for this is that, our government, in multiple instances, as I will reveal later, you'll see. Um, but in multiple instances, our government chose lies and propaganda over facts and science. And moving on. If the last myth is, and the last myth is, you can die from a weed overdose. Y'all see, I couldn't say it without laughing just a little bit. So you're not gonna find a case nowhere USA or nowhere globally, where someone has died as a direct result of overdosing off of from marijuana. You can't overdose from cannabis, boo. You just can't. There's no evidence again to support that. I mean, just like the 5 myths that I list, not unlike those, rather, written on the CDC's frequently asked questions page is this: quote, a fatal overdose is unlikely. If you go under the marijuana, I had to go under I looked up marijuana overdose on there, and it says a fatal overdose is unlikely. Okay, end quote. Yeah, I just don't think you're gonna find any credible case that involves marijuana overdoses. That's just it's just not that. You can find cases where people had marijuana and some other drug in there, but that just proves that people use more than one goddamn drug. But not that marijuana. Marijuana, it's a plant, baby. You just not about to die off of no herb. It's not about to happen. Your ass is gonna be sleepy, or you're gonna throw up, or paranoid. You're gonna be real paranoid if you do too much weed. You can be paranoid. I've seen people green out on weed, where they kind of blink out and come back to. But I haven't seen not a goddamn soul die in front of me. I've thrown up that was on edible stuff, because you gotta dose, you gotta micro dose them things. You gotta take that slow. You gotta take edible slow. I'm a bud girl. I'm a flower girl. Okay, don't give me no flowers I can't burn. Future husband, future boyfriend, future husband. Don't give me no flowers that I can't burn. Okay, don't give me no flowers that I can't smoke and put it in the air. Please and thank you. All right. Moving on to, I'm just going to give you a very, very, very brief history of cannabis in the U.S. The origins of cannabis is it's deep. It runs deep. It's been here for centuries. So the cannabis plant originated on the continent of Asia, Central Asia in particular. Popularity of it spread pretty quickly throughout the world, thanks to stuff like trade routes and missionaries and nomadic tribes and and surprisingly, world leaders as well, who all just really was trying to capitalize on its value. But a myriad of cultures integrated cannabis into their daily lives. So cannabis was globally accepted. It was accepted globally, worldwide, until the early 1800s. Into the early 1800s. And as far as when cannabis arrived here in the U.S., I've seen conflicting reports on when she arrived here to the U.S. And such reports that cannabis was brought in to the U.S. around the 1900s through trade routes from the continent of Asia, because again, she originated from Central Asia. But if you really want to know which one I think is about right, I'm gonna go with mid 1500s. That one sounds about right to me, just based on some of the other things that I read. So cannabis did not become like a social drug or a social problem. But for real, Quasi kept, it seemed more like a social solution to me, because oh God, weed in social settings, baby, has saved so many people from swallowing their teeth, from getting punched in the mouth, from getting punched in the face. So it seemed more like a social solution to me than a social problem. But that's just me. I wasn't there then, but it is definitely a social solution now for me. But it didn't become a social problem, quote unquote, until around 1910, in the southern region, like in particular in El Paso, Texas, and New Orleans, Louisiana. And that was because Black and brown people were smoking marijuana. And it is a fact. It is actual and factual that the name cannabis was shifted in the mainstream. And it was also federally reclassified to marijuana, to the name marijuana, so that it could be directly associated with Mexicans. Just textbook fear mongering, textbook racist fear mongering, just bullshit. You know what I'm saying? But moving on. Another reason that fear mongering and propaganda was triggered when it came to cannabis in the early 1900s, that was because the population has shifted. And in the 1900s in the United States, in particular with the great migration of the southern black folks southern black folks moving to northern cities, and the arrival of people arriving in from Texas, through Texas from Mexico, and also that was when the Italian and Jewish people started to arrive as well. So so basically, I'm saying all that to say that, not unlike the times that we are currently experiencing, it was an incredibly xenophobic time. Incredibly. Look, ain't much change, and not much has changed at all. But moving on, so that sparked the marijuana prohibition and the marijuana propaganda, because white teenagers were going to jazz clubs, and because the jazz scene, and as you know, black folks started jazz, as you know. Or if you don't know, now you do. In the words of Biggie, black folks started jazz. And especially in particular, again, in New Orleans, and Harlem. Baby, it was the white teenagers, the white people would go and party with black people in the jazz culture, jazz musicians. And jazz culture was full of weed. They smoke weed. They got songs about it. There's a whole album dedicated to all of the songs that were weed songs from the 30s and the listen, Google it. One in particular, a very, very popular one, was by Cab Calloway called The Reefer Man. Okay? Listen. That and to that is a whole other show. And I debated on how much of that I was going to put in this one. But that in particular, I feel deserves its own show, just because it's so amazingly interesting, and it just feels like, they deserve their own. So I'm still thinking about it. I don't know yet. I don't know yet if I'm gonna do that. I think that'll be a good show though, to highlight the marijuana culturally, especially since I'm gonna be talking about marijuana's cultural implications and what that brought us all the myths and propagandas that we're talking about. So I think it'll be interesting, and I think I may even throw in hip hop. I don't know. I think I'm gonna have to ponder on that a little while longer. I think that, but I do believe that that'll be interesting and people will like that. But moving on, because I'm babbling. So I'm gonna move on, because I told you that was a brief history. I didn't want to go in depth because it's a lot. And even that, the history of the origin of cannabis, I feel deserves its own show. But that wasn't what this show was about. I'm more irritated by the propaganda and the lies that is still being repeated and perpetuated. And we just got to, if you gonna not like something, or if you gonna hate something, then hate it from a fact-based place. Hate it because you know what it's about. Don't be repeating falsities, to me. Don't be up here repeating lies and misinformation to me. And be 10 toes down in it. And then my question be, have you done the research? Or you just repeating propaganda to me? Or you just repeating things that you heard about it, not things that you know about it? But moving on, that's the purpose of this, honey. The more you know, the more we all know. Knowledge is endless. It's the beauty of it. But moving on again, Cherie, you are babbling. You are babbling. You gonna see how I mellow right the fuck out too on my weed. So moving on to propaganda and the war on drugs, girl. So trigger warning on this war on drugs. It's not things that we don't already know, but it's something that'll still trigger, still you still want to choke the shit out of Anslinger, especially for what he did to Billie Holiday, among other leaders that lives they done fucked up. But moving on. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and light up my blue raspberry kush, because hold on, let me light a nice little instant in here, one of my little blunt effects. Be right back. Okay, so I'm back. So again, trigger warning to the black society at large, the black community. I'm gonna be talking about the war on drugs, and I know for us that is a sensitive subject, and rightfully so. All right, so propaganda in the war on drugs. So between the years of 1911 and 1933, several states outlawed the use of marijuana. As I light up mine. I hope I got this sound like a Lil Wayne track. The beginning of a Lil Wayne song. But moving on. So, the father of marijuana prohibition, I already said his name a couple times, and that's Harry Anslinger. He held multiple he held many different positions within our federal government, but the most notable, the one he's most known for, is the Commissioner of Federal Bureau of Narcotics, and he held that position from 1930 until 1962. That's far too fucking long. Okay, what's that? 32 years. I'm 32 years old. So my whole lifetime he spent giving hell to other people because his ass was deeply racist. Okay? His ass was deeply racist, and that influenced what measures he put in. But yeah, his racism influenced what measures that were taken against weed, a mild intoxicant. That's what I want. Like, all this boils down to this. Weed is a mild intoxicant. Weed is an herb. Weed is a plant. Now, all of this hoopla over a plant. La plante. Something that naturally grows from the earth. Something that don't need manipulation. People manipulate it, but it don't need it. Moving on. So look, here's a dog whistle laced. And I mean a dog whistle laced quote from Anslinger's trash ass. So you can see what I mean by deeply racist. Quote, I might say we find this teenage addiction in certain segments and certain neighborhoods. For instance, you can almost chalk it down this way. You see very little of it in New England. You come to New York, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Chicago, New Orleans. Homeboy was out here pointing out all the cities that was heavily saturated with black folk. Like, come on, sir, we see you, we hear you, we know what it is. They may pretend. Emphasis on pretend that they don't know, but girl, they know, we see y'all. Y'all can't come up with this bullshit like y'all don't know that shit be going on, because you know. But another fun fact about Harry Anslinger is, he was the key before there was Trump and the fake news and the he was king of fake news. That's what he did. That's his thing. He loved putting false narratives out there and lies and everything else. He started the shit before Chester Cheeto started it, okay? But and what I mean by that is he made up elaborate stories. and lies about weed, elaborate stories and lies about weed. And he will put them, because he started all this in '30s. So in the '30s, detective magazines was all the rave, and he will put these lies and propaganda and myths, and these stories, and and he will put these stories in detective magazines, just pure fear mongering about the dangers of marijuana and it being a public menace. And people believed this, and again, much like it is today, because people don't do their own goddamn research. People don't know nothing. But back then, I would say the difference is they didn't have the whole world at their fingertips like we do. And we don't have an excuse. You maybe can say, well, but here, ain't no goddamn excuse. It's no excuse. It's none. None. Now, but people knew nothing about cannabis. They knew nothing about weed. So, of course, they believe what he said. You have someone in a government official say, this is back when people actually really did trust the government. We not really out here trusting shit now, but this is back when folks really did trust the government. But for years, Anslinger promoted this lie that weed makes you insane. And again, moving on. I already said that point. I'm about to repeat a point, honey. No. Moving on. So in 1937, this is interesting here. 1937 is when Anslinger decided that he was gonna put a tax on marijuana, and that birthed the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. And under that act, the cultivation, importation, possession, and distribution of marijuana was taxed and regulated. So of course we understand cause and effect, honey. So because Anslinger decided to tax marijuana, the import and export and distribution and the cultivation and all this other shit. So because he decided to regulate it, Mayor LaGuardia of New York decided that he was gonna commission a comprehensive report on of cannabis and its effects and its effects. And and so their report was called The Marijuana Problem. And so, oh girl, the weed is, I'm gonna have to put her out real quick. Okay. And so that was called the marijuana problem in the city of New York. And so LaGuardia's report studied the sociological, medical, psychological, and pharmacological effect of marijuana, and it was released to the public in 1944. So the findings of the report totally destroyed every principle of Anslinger's philosophy about weed. I told you he's the father of the gateway drug myth. That is the myth that he started, and it kills your brain cells and it make you insane. He started all that shit. And so these are some of the findings, and I'm not gonna do all of them. I'm gonna do some of them. But you can look up LaGuardia's report. It's out there. It's on the internet. It's public, and here it is. So here is some of the findings from LaGuardia's report. Number one, the practice of smoking marijuana does not lead to addiction in the medical sense of the word. The use of marijuana does not lead to morphine or heroin or cocaine addiction, and no effort is made to create a market for these narcotics by stimulating the practice of marijuana smoking. Number three, marijuana is not the determining factor in the commission of major crimes. Number four, marijuana smoking is not widespread among school children. Number five, juvenile delinquency is not associated with smoking marijuana. Number six, publicity over the catastrophic effects of marijuana smoking in New York City is unfounded. Therefore, the gateway drug theory is without foundation. So basically, that report reveals that the use of marijuana does not induce violence, insanity, or sex crimes. Girl, I can't. Or lead to addiction or other drug use. I told you. And that's science from the 30s. Okay, he commissioned this report in 1938, although it was published and made public to the public in 1944. This is science from the 30s telling you. It basically dispelled all those myths that I gave in the beginning. But moving on. So basically, the science proves, and scientists from the 30s confirmed, obviously, that Anslinger and other leaders in the United States ignored the science. As I told you earlier, that's a common theme in my research, that the leaders ignored science and chose to perpetuate their propaganda in order to get whatever results that they wanted, to push whatever agendas they had. Sounds very familiar. You see, that's why history is my favorite subject, because baby, history don't do nothing but repeat itself and come back in different forms. And when history buffs see something that happened in a time in history and it just come back in a different form, we're like, bruh, listen, what's happening? What we're gonna do about this? Because we can't get the same result. We gotta do something different this time, because this happened before. This is deja vu, like a motherfucker. Cue Tina Marie. Okay, I don't know. Whatever. Alexa, play Tina Marie, deja vu. I just play Beyonce, deja vu. It's a lot. I don't know. We're doing the same things, and people still fighting fighting the legalization of marijuana. The legalization of marijuana would be the legalization of marijuana would solve a lot of problems. A big one in particular that I can think about is criminal justice, because the data shows us that marijuana is the biggest drug that people are busted for. More people are in jail for marijuana. Moving on. I'm gonna move on from that, because I'm gonna talk about that a little bit, like Tabitha Brown would say, in a pair of seconds. I'm gonna talk about that here soon. But again, the common theme is these folks just decide that they're going to choose lies over science. But yeah, our leaders, this government never cares about science unless it got to do with somebody's damn uterus. Unless it got to do with our uterus. Unless it has to do with our uterus, the government don't care nothing about nobody's science. Okay? They deny it when it comes to the weather. They deny when it, girl. Moving on. Just trash. Moving on. LaGuardia's report also revealed, this is not a shocker at all, but that people of color were being arrested at higher rates as a result of the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, which, let's be real, was the plan all along. That's what homeboy wanted to do all along, was target people. That's the war on drugs. The war on drugs is not a war on actual drugs. It's a war on actual people, in particular black and brown people. It's just actual and factual, and you can go ahead and feel free to check your mama or the facts. Moving on. So let's fast forward 30 some years to the 70s, 1970 to be exact, when President Richard Nixon signed into law the Controlled Substance Act. And the reason why this act is important is because as a part of his version of war on drugs, because there were a couple. You have Ann Slanger in the 30s to the 60s. Then you got Nixon in the 70s. Then you got Reagan punk ass in the 80s. Girl, we couldn't get no break. But this act, the Controlled Substance Act, which was passed by Richard Nixon in 1970, established the federal drug policy and enforcement that we know today, that we see today, is literally the same. That act established not just our current federal drug policy, but the scheduling system, where it placed all substances regulated under existing federal law into one of 5 schedules. And also was the birth of Jesus Christ, of the DEA. It was also the birth of DEA. But marijuana was, and still, baby, listed as a Schedule 1. And Schedule 1 is the category that it's for harmful drugs with no medical use and have a high potential for abuse. Now, just by the definition of what a Schedule 1 drug is, marijuana should not be on there, because marijuana has been scientifically proven to not yield high potential for abuse. Also, it has also been proven that it is medicinally that it has therapeutic value. So scientifically speaking, marijuana should not be listed as a Schedule 1 drug. Baby, this is so ghetto. It's so ghetto. So, but Nixon also commissioned, just like LaGuardia, Nixon also commissioned a report on marijuana, and it was originally called National Commission on Marijuana and Drug Abuse. And this was also part of his war on drugs, because he was trying to prove that it is harmful. So when he requested his report, he, much like how Trump did, when Trump was calling officials in Georgia telling them they need to find 11,000 votes and all this stuff, they got him on. I'm just gonna say allegedly, just to say allegedly, even though he is on tape saying it, but allegedly. Just to cover my ass. But just like that, Nixon, trash ass, crooked ass, not only commissioned a report, but told them that the report needed to blur the distinction between marijuana and hard drugs. He wanted them to blur the lines, aka lie about it. So, in a series of tapes that were recorded during Nixon's presidency that has now been declassified, those tapes revealed his true feelings and how he really felt, and what I mean. It explains what I mean by blur the lines of distinction between marijuana and hard drugs. And this is what Nixon said. This is a quote, and you can look it up, and you can hear it for yourself. You can hear it. You can hear his voice for yourself. And this is what he said. Quote, I want a goddamn strong statement on marijuana. I mean, one on marijuana that just tears the ass out of them. Funny thing, every one of those bastards out for legalizing marijuana is Jewish. Child of racism. What the Christ is the matter with Jews, Bob? I told y'all, trigger warning. What is the matter with them? By God, we're going to hit the marijuana thing, and I mean hit it right. And I want to hit it right square in the puss. End quote. You can't make this shit up. You just can't make it up. I wish that I was lying, but I'm not. You can't make this shit up. It is. Where my weed at? Because so the results of his report was controversial, and it was controversial because it didn't go the way he wanted to. And it was so controversial that three of the authors of that report, that is now known as, at first it was known as National Commission of Marijuana and Drug Abuse. Now it's known, if you look it up, you can look it up and find it under the Schaefer Report. So the Schaefer Report, so they held a live television event to discuss what they found with the public, because they thought it was important for the public to know, because these are scientists now. They didn't want it to be political. That's what Nixon was trying to make it, a political thing. This is not a political thing. This was science. This is actual and goddamn factual, okay? So they held a live TV event to discuss their findings with the public. And the Schaefer Report found that marijuana has to a great extent been mischaracterized. Shocker. And this is what they said, quote, there has been previous misinformation, false statements, and for that reason, we've attempted to demythalize the drug. The occasional use of marijuana does not do any physical harm. and may not do any psychological harm. Unfortunately, because marijuana has become politicized, the realities have become blurred. There go that word again. Okay. We hope that you will study our report carefully and that it will have an influence in America. The report recommended decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana. And guess what happened? Not that, because I already told you marijuana is still listed federally as a Schedule 1 drug. Here go another instance where the government chose propaganda and lies over facts and science. Over facts and science. It is a running theme, and it's insane that it's relevant. That we just had an administration that did not believe in science. Thank God we voted that motherfucking ass out. But my God, how is it? How is it that everybody, that we're so blind, or your heads are in your asses, or y'all just so comfortable with your lives that you just don't want anything to change. So you would just rather continue to repeat. Like, that shit is literally the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Y'all listen. Moving on. But Nixon actually, again, he chose propaganda and lies, and this motherfucker doubled down, and he imposed harsher penalties for drug pushers, as he put it. So here's another trigger warning for you. Here's more corruption. Here's another example of this. Shows you how deep the racism and the corruption was when it came to marijuana, when it came to this quote unquote war on drugs. So in a statement that was made in like 1994, one of Nixon's senior advisors, he was Nixon's domestic policy chief, and John Elkman told writer Dan Bonham, "You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt these communities. We arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. Even though you know that people in the federal government, that people in the government is corrupt as fuck, it's still disturbing. It's still really disturbing to hear it. It feels moving on. So we're gonna move on to what we're doing now, the fight now to legalize. I know you see legalize on my shirt. This shirt says legalize being black. And yes, we need to legalize being black, and we need to legalize cannabis, okay? So I'm advocating for my people, and I'm advocating for the flower power, okay? So now, The reason why I wanted to bring up Anslinger, the war on drugs, propaganda, all of that, and the reason why I want to do all of this because uh, as more states again legalize marijuana, decriminalize, it's important that there's other legislation built in that legislation, written in that legislation, and that's making sure that the folks that's locked up for this shit, for marijuana, for this plant, that they get out and that their records are expunged and that they are able to transition into life, and that if they want a stake in this business, in the marijuana business, that they can get a stake in it, and that people, and also I think it's important to require that the marijuana business, not be so goddamn racist itself. Like, it's insane how I know people always like to say, you know, you put race in everything, but race is in everything. If I gotta put my race in order to take a test, if I gotta put my race in order to get a goddamn job or an apartment or whatever the fuck, then race obviously is deeply, deeply important to this country. Hell, it's bit on racism and everything you can directly tie it back. It's insane. Even this criminalizing marijuana is racist. There, I said it. The proof is in the facts, and I implore you. Matter of fact, I encourage you to read it, and then let's discuss it. Read the hard facts in black and white, and then let's discuss. Moving on. So again, the reason why I wanted to do this is because finding out that nearly half, I don't want to say it like that. I need to find a new way of saying that. Hold on. Let me think. So look. The reason why it's important for legislation to be built into the legalization of marijuana legislation, and what I mean by the legislation that's needed is reason why added legislation is needed to help people that are locked away because of this is because nearly half of all drug arrests in the United States are for marijuana. All the meth in the my God, and marijuana is the what? All the opiates. It's a goddamn epidemic. All of the heroin and marijuana is the most of the y'all for a plant. And there's people out here getting rich off it. This is what we mean. And guess what? Per usual, the majority of the arrests are disproportionately black and brown. You know. And I think it's important for us to continue to ask, why is this? Why is this, especially providing that the government data shows that everyone is using marijuana at the same rates? All of us, everybody we're using marijuana at about the same rate. And I'm not even understanding why we have to continue to push for something when over half of America agree that it should be legal. Matter of fact, let me give you Gallup, the latest Gallup poll says 68% of Americans support marijuana legalization. And so that means 7 in 10 Americans believe marijuana should be legal. Okay, so there are bills in both chambers of the House. In both chambers of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate. Now, the House already passed. They already passed their legislation. Their legislation is called the MORE Act. They passed that legislation on my birthday, on December 4th, but they did it on December 4th of last year. That's my birthday, December 4th. They did it December 4th, 2020. They passed the MORE Act. And in the MORE Act, and the Senate has a bill as well that was introduced by Cory Booker, and it's still there. It's been there since like February 2019, I think, or something like that. And it's still there. So let's see. The MORE Act, the MORE Act, which is the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, that passed in the House, removes marijuana from the list of scheduled substances under the Controlled Substance Act. So that act that Nixon put in place that Nixon passed in 1970. Now it would remove marijuana from that. Number 2, it eliminate criminal penalties for an individual who manufactures, distributes, or possesses marijuana. Number 3, establishes a process to expunge convictions and conduct sentencing review hearings related to federal cannabis offenses. Now this is important. Replace statutory references to marijuana and marijuana, because back when in the 30s, when Onslager and them was doing it, they was calling it marijuana with the H instead of a U. Probably because they racist ass they know that the J whatever. Moving on. Number 5, it establishes a trust fund to support various programs and services for individuals and businesses and communities impacted by the war on drugs. It does other things as well, so I implore you, go to congress.gov and look it up and see what it does for yourself. See the rest of it for yourself. The Marijuana Justice Act, that's the bill that's in the Senate right now, that's just sitting. I think it's waiting for the Judicial Committee review or something like that. But moving on. Then that bill does this. It removes marijuana from the list of controlled substances and make it legal at the federal level. Number 2, it reinvests in communities that have been most harmed by the war on drugs. And the Community Reinvestment Fund, it could be used for projects such as job training programs, reentry services, and community centers. That's good. Number 3, it expunged the records of those who have served their time, and this bill is also retroactive, and that means it would apply to those already serving time behind bars for marijuana related offenses. Good. This bill would also incentivize states through the use of federal funds to change their marijuana laws if those states were shown to have a disproportionate effect on low-income individuals and or people of color. So if we could just get the goddamn Senate to get it together and go on and pass her so we can get these people out of jail and get them back in the community. And so y'all can go ahead and invest them funds in the community. Y'all go ahead and defund the police too while you at it. Okay, go on and just dismember that. Go on and dismantle it. It's time for us to figure out a new, and there are places that have implemented new policing systems, and it works, and it's working right now. So we should be doing that too while we are legalizing weed and black people. Moving on. So look, I'm saying all this to say that if you cannot tell, honey, from this episode, that I am a proud cannabis connoisseur and a proud cannabis advocate. Unapologetic about it. You know, I believe that cannabis is a great alternative for some of the prescription that big pharma and the healthcare system, sometimes Western healthcare, like to push, you know. And we all know it's all about money with them. It's not about actually making sure that people are healing and functional, you know. It's just to get you by so you can come back and spend more money with them. And but I really wholeheartedly believe that once cannabis is no longer listed as a Schedule 1 drug, then we will be able to properly study it, you know, and we'll be able to properly study it without conditions, you know, without conditions, you know, and then I think we would truly be able to enjoy and benefit from the full power of the plant, you know, but the full medicinal power of marijuana. Of cannabis. But the crazy part is, the irony of it all is, I guess, is that you can't get data because it's still listed as a Schedule 1 drug, and it's still listed as a Schedule 1 drug because you can't get data. Make it make sense, Jesus. You gotta just make it make sense. But the other thing that I learned by doing this is that marijuana prohibition has more to do with racism and politics than science and facts. And that is actual and factual. I also learned that marijuana gets stigmatized for its cultural implications, more like just far beyond rationality. You know, first with the jazz musicians and the integrationists, the white folks that decide to just party and enjoy themselves. And then with the hippies who didn't subscribe to who didn't really subscribe to mainstream institutions and cultures and all, and even the fact that they are, and I don't believe that they believed that they were superior to anybody else. They were free love, honey. You know, and they were even criminalized and prosecuted. You know, this shit is insane. It is insane, but I think it proves just as much as the time that we're living in right now proves that fear is a powerful motivator, honey. Okay? A powerful motivator. And that misinformation and uh, fear and ignorance and fear mongering. Jesus. And propaganda has all been a impetus for a lot, if not all, honey, if not all of the stigmatization and lies that still surround cannabis to this day. Okay. And moving on. Moving on. With that, honey, we're done. That is the end. Moving on to Shots for the Road. And Shots for the Road is a little fun this week. So my quote this week is actually a song lyric, and it's a song from Jhené Aiko from her classic, and fuck what you heard, honey, Chilombo is a classic. I still pump it. From start to finish, just hit. You ain't got to skip Nane song, okay? But Jhené Aiko, girl, classic. Just love it. But this song is Trying to Smoke. So here's my quote from that song. If I could fly, I would probably never come down. With all the bullshit, confusion on the ground, I wish that I was high, 'cause I can't live my life when it's loud. So I'm gonna call the bros, tell them roll up one right now. I'm trying to smoke. If you know, you know. This is my favorite part of the song, honey. Well, one of my favorite parts of the song. If you know, you know. That shit is beautiful. You gotta just let it go. Spark up a blunt and smoke. Alright, and so the song goes on to say, trying to keep myself from looking over the edge. I know life's a bitch, but she can at least give me head. My God. Sometimes, is that too much to ask? That's why lately I've been smoking on gas. I know God is good. I know He keep me alive. I be probably talking to Him most when I'm high. I see all this shit crystal clear. When I'm high, I see through the smoke in the mirrors. Through the smoke in the mirrors. And an honorable mention, and I'll mention this because my mama said, you gotta mention Rick James. So this for you, Mama. And that's Mary Jane. And thanks to the execs for not knowing, for y'all thanks to the record execs that thought he was talking about a real woman. And and not weed. Cause we probably wouldn't have this classic. No, I know we wouldn't have this classic. And that's Mary Jane. And here are the lyrics. I'm in love with Mary Jane. She's my main thing. She make me feel alright. She makes my heart sing. And when I'm feeling low, she comes as no surprise, turns me on with her love, takes me to paradise. Do you love me, Mary Jane? And with that, honey, we're done. That's it. If you want to connect with me, then head over to cocktailsandteapodcast.com, where you can connect with me on Instagram and subscribe to my YouTube, where you can watch the video version of this podcast. Also, some of my stand-up comedy videos. Gonna show me some love. Also, your reviews really, really encourage me and help other people find this podcast. So if my podcast ever made you laugh or think, then please rate, review, and share it with a friend. Until next time, cheers. Love, light, and insight. Cheers.